Welcome to Akeelah's Trading Academy. Get ready for one of the most dynamic learning experiences you've ever seen. So whether you already trade stocks or are looking to get into trading, or maybe you just want to learn how to cut years off of your retirement, this Trading Academy is for you. Here's a look at some lessons from our previous trading academies. And the only reason I'm pointing this out is, again, when we were talking about people getting liquidated, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. Who other than retail traders who don't know what the heck they're doing, who was buying Bitcoin? Because if they were doing it on Ethereum, they're parallel. Bitcoin is doing the same thing. And I'm going to jump to the Ethereum here again. But that means people who were liquidated were buying Bitcoin right in here. The second week of September, once we started consolidating here and made this push, people started opening buy orders, not knowing that all this thing was coming to was to 117 and some change. And then it was going to drop it like it's hot. Okay, and now here you can see how this Bitcoin assessment played out. So we've been teaching you how to read the markets and see what they're telling us. So we identified that this was a clear structural break here from our Trading Academy sessions. And we could see clearly that because of this break, that the target for this was for Bitcoin to come all the way down to the weekly source is what we would call it. And that's the 59,900, right at 60,000 level. So at that time, Bitcoin was between 108,000, 110,000, somewhere in that range. So let's see how that played out. We'll go back and replay this on the daily chart. So you can see as this daily is playing out, this is day by day, what's going on. But little by little, Bitcoin is working its way down. And there are people here, because they're not able to read and understand what we're going to be teaching you, they're buying these dips. They're buying here thinking, oh, it's going to push back up. They're trying to buy here again. Oh, it's pushing back up. It went from 80,000 back up to 95,000. Let's buy it again. But we're going to know here, that's what happened. So you're going to be able to learn how to see markets like this and to identify things like this came all the way down to our target. And so this was pretty much almost a 50% off sale on Bitcoin. If you had the patience, if you had the skills and knowledge to understand what the market is saying to you. Weekly, our demand zone, which means from on the weekly chart, the strongest, we classify demand zone, is where is the location of the highest volume of buying activity. It's way down here at this candle, $2,700. From $2,000, $2,100 to $2,700. That's where the weekly support is for Ethereum. Think of this like a language. These letters are making words, and words are making sentences, and sentences making paragraphs. The market was telling us back here, man, this thing here is pumping. It's doing great. Ethereum is doing good. And then we made a higher high. Man, this little thing here, this is just a pullback. People thought that this candle here was just a pullback and the market was going to move side and keep going. I saw the post, the news report, hey, Ethereum's going to, $7,000 and all this kind of stuff. It's a bunch of hogwash. So ever since August 25th, you told me you're coming to 3,500. Okay, I'll flow with that. And when we get when we get to 3,500, I'll see what you got to say, and then I'll respond accordingly. But for right now, all I'm activating on is the fact that Ethereum had this breaker structure and on the daily, and it told me that it's coming back. So it had the structure and came back to the source and rejected. So that's three things that's told me that it's coming here. Okay, guys. So yeah, so this is exactly what, why we're pointing this out here. Nvidia is one of the hottest stocks on the planet, but you have to understand that this is a structural break here. This market has pumped up and up and up, and the language that the market is telling us, what it's speaking, it's saying, I'm reaching exhaustion here. Now, there's nothing wrong with having pullbacks like this, but what we've shown you up in this area, you've already seen how this is a structural break. But this is not for Nvidia to continue and go to $200 or so. Now it will eventually get there, but right now, at a minimum, the target is going to be this 109 area. And we've already talked about how to establish what these support zones are. NVIDIA is sitting at, as of now, is right at $140 to $147. Just depends on how the day closes. But it's almost unfathomable for people to think that this is going to drop down to $100 again or near $100. But that's what the market is telling us. And once you learn to see this kind of structure, you'll be able to understand that. Now, I'm going to point out too that usually when this happens, my target, especially from a weekly standpoint, if I see this kind of structural break on the higher time frame, it's really down to this source area, because these inner support areas, if we have a structural break on a higher time frame, they're not going to hold that. So my target would be, after seeing this, is saying this is going to fall down to the $88 to $90 range. So you're talking about, a huge reduction. And this is one of the cases where even if you're an investor and you're saying, well, I'm just, in this stock, I'm holding it long term, you got to be able to see there's a very high probability that this thing is going to drop 50, 60+%. And so do you want to endure that kind of a drop? That's a question you're going to have to answer on your own. Okay, and now here's a look at how NVIDIA played out. So we were able to identify and teach you how to see that clearly the market was showing us there was a break of structure here. And it was indicating to us that based on the way we were just reading the market, reading what it's given to us, that NVIDIA was going to fall from the $140, $150 range down to at least $109, and likely down to this $88 to $90 range. And so that's a huge drop. So whether you're, someone that's, day trading this kind of asset, or if you're a long-term holder, again, NVIDIA is one of the most popular stocks on the planet. So people are very interested in this stock. If this is something you're buying to hold, you have to be able to take advantage of high probabilities cases where the market is telling us the value is going to drop substantially. So if you're able to see like this, then even if you're a long-term holder, you release that stock, you get out of it here in this $140 range, and when it comes back down to these areas, you buy again. You increase your holdings. That's the way you're going to grow your portfolio as a long-term holder. You increase the amount of shares you can buy, you can have, without having to put out more money to do so. So let's see how this played out on NVIDIA, because this ended up doing nearly exactly what we projected and what we're teaching you to be able to read. So we see initially there's some drops down, and it pulled back up again, but this was our area that already told us it's not going above this. And NVIDIA eventually came down to these areas that were previously support, but they were not going to hold. And this came down to a target, actually came lower than that. Looks like NVIDIA came down as low as $86. So, within $1 or so of our target. So as the market continues, so that did that between January of 25, and it took until April. So a couple of months. So we're endeavoring to teach you how to read the markets, see what they're saying, and find high probable opportunities like this. Let's say, for example, you had 100 shares of NVIDIA and you're long on this. You want to hold it for the long term. But if you're able to get out at $140, that's $14,000 that you have. You hold that until you get to these areas where it's much more advantageous to buy it. You buy it at $90. Now you have 150, 155 shares. You just increase your holdings by 50+%. How many years is that going to cut off of your retirement? Or how many years is that going to advance your financial goals by you being able to find opportunities like this? So at Akeelah Trading Academy, we're ready to help you open doors you never thought were possible. Are you ready to get started?